Hello, witches and other folks who watch this. Hi from slightly snowy Minnesota, USA, where our country is still on fire. Yeah, it's great to watch. Everybody's stress level over here is really something else. And I know that that's translating to those who are eating popcorn and watching from afar. So if you're from another country, thanks for holding space for us. We really need it because, yeah, we're about to break up with a malevolent narcissist, and we know that's going to be messy, really messy. Okay, so today, what I think I will talk about is a subject that needs to be discussed regularly in pagan and Wiccan groups and society, but also that needs to be explained to people who are just following along, who think, this is a fascinating subject, so they want to, like I say, see what those crazy pagans are over there doing. Okay, so sex positivity in a fertility religion. What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? What have we learned? Because we've been doing this for a minute now. Even though Wicca is a modern religion from the 20th century, it's still, we've been doing it since, when did Uncle Jerry come out? Like 1948, I want to say, or something like that. And now it's 2020. So we have been practicing this religion and having various iterations of it come from the original, and also kind of have intermingled and intermixed with some other types of modern paganism, some of which are reconstructionist or seek to be, and some of which are not. So it's this really interesting mishmash of different types of paganism and different attitudes, but all of them claim to be fertility religions. Now this, I want to give credit where credit is due. Lady River, my friend, and fellow third degree in my tradition of Wicca, has started a very cool podcast called Gaia Unveiled, and I follow her. And the latest installment of her podcast had to do with the scientific understanding of speciation in the animal and plant kingdoms, and then applying that scientific concept to social groups under which religions can be filed, and noticing the same phenomenon happens, even though it's not like physically genetic with us, it's socially genetic, if you will, because as we know, Gardner's original form of Wicca, which is still being practiced today, Gardnerian Wicca, what we have is, then we had his contemporary Alex and Maxine Sanders. They had Alexandrian Wicca, which is basically, Gardnerian Wicca with the license number filed off, and then they added some stuff. So I think they added, do they add eight tenets of faith, I want to say? And anyway, so a legitimate tradition of Wicca is going to be able to trace itself back lineage-wise through initiate to initiate to initiate back to either Gardnerian or Alexandrian Wicca, or in the case of my tradition that trained me, both. Also, the new project that I'm starting has a Gardnerian high priest, and then there are 3 of us Blue Star third degrees who are creating something new. So this will be another genetic iteration, if you will. But so I've heard people say, and this is untrue, but there's a kernel of truth in it, that Gerald Gardner created a lot of the conventions of the Wicca that he presented to the world with the idea of seducing women. And some have even said, seducing young girls. And that's That's not true until maybe the end. Certainly Valiente and some other early high priestesses, Patricia Crowther, and others were all adult women. I was told by my Gardnerian acquaintance, however, that towards the end of his life, he did get a little creepy with the age differences. That doesn't surprise me. There are also some oathbound things about how Wiccan elevations are performed that a lot of us will be like, oh, Uncle Jerry, you were doing that to get your kicks, weren't you? It is a fertility religion. It is born of counterculture. Original Wicca, both Alexandrian and Gardnerian, did contain sex acts. Okay, that's very well known. Now, that changed. If I'd had to have, okay, I loved my teacher Bill. Loved him to death. If I had to have sex with my teacher Bill, I never would have been initiated. Wasn't gonna happen. That's from both of us too. Like, he's very monogamous and he's married. And I'm glad that we changed that part of how Wicca is practiced, because the Great Rite works just fine with sympathetic magic. But I'm going to talk a little bit about like sex positivity as it relates to modern Wiccan groups, and by modern I mean post 20th century, and kind of what I have experienced with that. Because some people think that Wicca is all about sex. As a matter of fact, I don't think he's called for the last like 2 years, but there was a guy who used to call me like once a year on the regular, pretending to be different people, trying to get into my coven because he thought we were a sex club, which is like, dude, no, that's not what this is about. And it was so funny because he was like, you can tell me. You can tell me. I mean, I'm not going to judge you. I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. And I was like, tell you what, we don't have sex in our coven, like as part of ritual or anything like that. And in my group especially, you don't date your student. You don't teach your lover. It's not appropriate. You are not able to make good judgment calls with when your eyes are clouded with, you know, rainbows and puppies over your lover who you're teaching. So that's a big no-no in my group. And we really emphasize that. Not so in all groups. And like I say, I have a real moral problem with that. I do. I mean, sometimes as a teacher, I have to kick somebody's butt pretty hard, not obviously physically, but, you know, there are times when I have to hand down edicts that do not please people. And if that person was my lover, it would really mess with our relationship. And I don't need that kind of drama in my coven. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about sex positivity. We do tout sex positivity, but what does that mean? Okay, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. Sex positivity doesn't mean there are no rules. Woohoo, orgies! You know, that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean not orgies either, because if there are a bunch of consenting adults, and this isn't going to happen like in conjunction with my religion being performed like in a ritual, but pagans hang out together, you know, so I will not say that I have never seen or found indication of groups at pagan get-togethers where like group sex happens. I know that it has happened. I have friends who have participated in those things. I never have. I'm not, groups aren't for me. Like, I'm a hyper-focuser, not a multitasker. Anyway, but it doesn't mean there's no rules. And it also doesn't mean this. And I've seen people do this, and I will call somebody's shit out on them if they pull this bullshit, okay? What do you mean you don't want to participate in this sex stuff that we're doing? You need to get over your hang-ups. You're not sex positive. Abso-fucking-lutely not, excuse my French. This one is going to have to be like marked not for children. I'm going to do that. Nobody, no perino there, sunshine. Never say that in front of me. I don't care if I don't even know you. It will be a bad day for you. You don't pressure anyone into having sex, or suggest that if they won't acquiesce to what you want them to do, that they're not sex positive. You are the one who's not sex positive, not them. So let me tell you a real story here. Now, if you haven't figured out, I'm kind of fiery. I'm a little bit fiery, just a little. I don't consider that to be a negative personality trait of mine. Those who do are welcome to not involve themselves with me. So, true story, my first initiate student in my home coven of Ravenstar was a lovely woman who has many disabilities. And she is a voluntary virgin. She's in her 40s. She was in her 30s, early 30s when I was teaching her. And she'd never slept with anybody. And she's a very good priestess, but so I was talking with her, having the conversation, are we going to have a student-teacher relationship? And I said, talk to me about your celibacy. Why do you want to be an initiate in a fertility religion that gives very heavy nods towards sexual procreation, yet you're voluntarily celibate? I want to hear about that. And she's like, well, physically, sex could kill me, and a pregnancy would kill me. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. But what attracts you to this religion? And she said, I feel more myself when I'm in Wiccan ritual than I feel myself at any other time. I feel like I'm home. Okay, all right. Everybody knows what that feels like. All pagans know what it feels like to find home. And so I accepted that. And to this day, she has never had sex with anyone. But she adequately handles the great rite just fine, as far as, with the chalice of wine and the athame. And it's also really cool, for me anyway, to have lots of diversity in pagan groups. The more diversity we have, the better. And all types of diversity. Obviously people, we want them to be of legal age, so we don't want children. We want diversity of age within the adult sphere, though. Different races, different cultural backgrounds, different educational levels, different professions, even different politics sometimes, depending on where that line is crossed with ethics and morality. So I love that we have a priestess in our tradition who can legitimately invoke Artemis, who is a virgin. That's beautiful. I mean, to offer a virgin goddess a vessel that conforms to that aspect of her is the greatest thing ever. So sex positivity doesn't just mean that you accept the sex people have if it's non-harming. It means you accept the sex people don't have. Okay, so if somebody says, hey, look, I'm not into this particular sexual practice, the sex positive way to respond to that is, okay, all right, nobody has to do anything they don't want to do. Yeah. Now, something can happen when groups are working together and it's not talked about enough. And that is that when a priest and priestess are not actual lovers, a lot of us are, I run my coven with my husband, so clearly, we are lovers. But let's say I'm working with a different priest. I'm across the altar from him. And if we're doing the energy correctly, we will feel a very strong sexual pull. But that isn't us being attracted to each other. It is the god and the goddess acting through us and us feeling their attraction for one another. And that's real, okay? And it needs to be talked about so that people don't freak out when they experience it. Okay, so there's a priest who is no longer in my group, but he was a very beloved working partner of mine. and I still care for him very deeply. It was like we were siblings or cousins. I love him like family, like that. And make no mistake, I would rather saw off my left pinky toe than have sex with him, because it would feel like I was having sex with my brother. Ew, So when I first had that experience with him in ritual, I was freaked out. I was a first degree. I felt this super strong pull, and I was like, oh, whoa, what was that? And instinctively what I did, his wife happened to be in the circle with us, and I kind of grabbed her. We're friends, so I could like touch her and it wasn't a big deal. So I grabbed her and I was like, enjoy this. you just take this energy home on me, enjoy that, get that party started. And that was how I handled it. And I teach my students to do this. I teach my students to expect it. I teach my students how to handle it. We talk about it. In the new project that we're developing, we are actually putting a term to it, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it is, but I'll have it in my notes. But we're going to actually call it by a term in order to teach about it and lend legitimacy to it. Because mishandled or misunderstood, that sort of energy can break up relationships, can end marriages. And it has happened in my tradition, my home tradition. It has happened because people didn't understand what was going on. Yeah. So sex positivity means consent culture. Okay, consent can never be coerced, or it's not consent. Consent can never be pressured, or it's not consent. Okay, so saying things like, you're just not sex positive, you need to get over your hangups, that is what we call coercion. And that is rapey AF. Okay, that is straight up rapey. Do not do that. Do not. Now, let's talk a little bit about skyclad practice. Okay, so in my tradition, outer court is always robed. All right, so always in ritual robes. But there are some things in Wicca that are done skyclad. Skyclad, what does that mean? It means naked. It means using ritual nakedness as a spiritual tool. So I can hear you being all like, yeah, right. Okay, understandable, but let me explain some things to you. Okay, first of all, the nakedness of skyclad practice isn't sexual, like at all. It's really not. A person who experiences it that way isn't ready to practice that way. If you get turned on by being in a group of skyclad witches, some sexual maturity needs to develop in that person, okay? Yeah, it's not sexual. It is meant for several reasons. It is done, okay, so this is not to say that Uncle Jerry and Uncle Alex didn't have sexual motivations of their own. I cannot argue that they did or didn't. They're both dead, okay? So I think Sanders is dead. If he's not, he's really old. I know Maxine is probably still alive. Anyway, I cannot argue for or against that, but I will tell you that being in skyclad ritual is very, feels very formal, if you can understand that. It's a very reverent experience, because what happens is you are constantly being reminded that no trappings of social class or any sort of position in society can be there when you're naked. You know, like that. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter how much money you have. We come into this world naked, and we leave naked in the sense that we don't have our body to wear anymore when we leave. So that nudity is an act of reverence for keeping that in our consciousness. The other thing that it does is it teaches us not to judge people's body types, okay? People of all shapes and sizes are Wiccan. People who conform or do not conform to society's beauty standards are Wiccan. There are some people who are considered very beautiful who are Wiccan too. But no one is ever turned away from any legit organization because you don't look like I want to look at you naked. Like, that's not how that goes at all. People are taught to love whatever their body is. We're very, very body positive in paganism. But have there been people in paganism and Wicca who have misused the concept of sex positivity in order to be predatory sexually? Yeah. Those people have happened. And I mean, it happened in my own tradition. This guy, he wasn't a founder, but he was an early initiate. Kenny Klein just passed away recently, was doing time for the possession with intent to distribute child pornography, and had a reputation many decades prior to that for being kind of the creepy uncle that you don't let your 14-year-old go out in the woods with. You know what I mean? We as a tradition and also as a larger pagan society have to take responsibility for having either produced or at least not banished that guy. There are abusive people in all walks of life. And abusive people are attracted to power, and they're attracted to opportunity. Okay, so the station of clergy is very abusable. Ask the Catholic Church about that. We know that the Catholic Church did not set out to be like, let's harbor child molesters. Let's do that. That sounds like a good plan. They weren't doing that, but they ended up harboring and nurturing child molesters. So we, as another religious organization and set of organizations, look at this and we're like, wow, let's learn from this. What did they do or not do that they should have responded differently to? So we do a lot of talking about that, because we don't want people to use our religion as a way to get close to vulnerable people. That's not why we're here, you know? But sex positivity, I think, is very important. And I think it needs to be continually talked about. This is getting a little bit long. I'm going to wrap up in a couple minutes here, but I'm going to probably make more than one video about sex positivity as it pertains to fertility religions, because it's an important subject. There are a fair number of survivors of sexual abuse and assault who find their way to Wicca and paganism. And so a lot of times we as teachers, as people who are leaders in our respective organizations, will do a lot of talking about that and be like, okay, you know, how do we empower these people and honor that they've had these life experiences and make them feel comfortable and safe? And that's an ongoing question. And we do a lot of talking to those individuals. One of the things that we ultimately do ask people, certainly not right away, but if they're really serious about wanting to stick around and be in our organizations, saying things like, you know, if you are a survivor of any kind of abuse or assault, we would like to know so that we don't trigger you, so that we don't trigger your trauma. We can therefore prepare you mindfully before you have a, like a ritual action that may dig up some feelings, and cause you pain. That sort of thing needs to be discussed. And myself being a survivor and knowing other people who are survivors, who are in my tradition and who are in the general pagan population, we get together and talk, and we share support with and for one another, and we talk about our trauma. And that's definitely part of the religious support that we give to ourselves and our group members, is that we talk about trauma and how we can apply the teachings of our religion toward healing that pain and becoming as healthy as we can become, given that we are survivors. So there you go. Another fiery video from Fiery Kristen over here. Honestly, passion is a good thing in my mind. It is. And I mean also all sorts of passion. I asked my husband once, because this is legit, okay? I give him crap because you know how some guys like, redheads and some guys like, legs? Well, my husband's flavor of woman is batshit, and I'm not kidding. I'm like, what is it with you and the crazy chicks? Like, what is, going on there? And he just kind of kissed me on the top of the head, and he's like, you're just fun. And I was like, you figured it out. Women who have tempers are very enthusiastic lovers. Yeah, and he figured that out. He's like, I will take your crazy all day long if I get to have your crazy in this particular way. And I was like, good to know. Okay, very good to know. So he's probably the only man on the planet who can deal with my crazy ass, but we're very well suited. So at any rate, expect passion from me. If you weren't expecting it before, if you haven't watched my videos before, there's some passion in all of my videos about different subjects. But taking advantage of vulnerable people will cause me to go from 0 to rage demon like instantaneously. So understand that. I'm very protective of people, very protective of people's vulnerabilities. And all sexual acts need to be fully consensual, because as in the words of Doreen Valiente in the Charge of the Goddess, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. And this is true. And we take that very seriously. All right. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. And we'll revisit this subject again. All right. May you be blessed.